earlier I mentioned that you had that parallel with Lee Sklar, having mastered a different instrument before bass. You also have a parallel with another one of our past guests, Carol Kay, in that you're both very big into music education. I remember the articles you wrote for Guitar Player magazine, and I know you've been a contributor to many other magazines. We're not on tour. You can be found teaching at the Players School of Music in Clearwater, Florida, which is convenient since that's where you live.
Right.
When was the school founded?
I also own the school.
I know, I'm joking here. When was the school founded, and what's the primary focus of the curriculum?
My son, it's sort of a sad story gone well. My son got cancer when he was about 5, and I quit playing so I could stay home with him. To make a living while he was under treatments and all, I started the Players School of Music. He got healthy. He's 19 and a half now. And I kept the school, and the premise was based on let's say, the logic that everything else seemed to be based on when you pay for an education in something, which is to learn the facts. And I noticed that if anybody paid money, and that's sort of the criteria here, if you pay for an education, if anyone paid money to learn something in cooking, driving a car, learning a language, going to college, learning how to play golf, if people that learned in any area who paid for an education learned facts, not art. They didn't learn golf in the artful sense. They learned how to hold a golf club and how to stand. Mm-hmm. So since everything seemed to function that way, I also believe that music is the only way that musicians can get better if they seek out an education. So the Players School functions entirely based upon one coming in at whatever level they're at. If they can read well, wonderful. If they can't read a note, fine. If they can play in solo, that's terrific. If they can't play 2 notes back to back, that's where we begin. So the premise of the school is come in as you are and practice, not in pain and not under duress, but practice every day somewhat some of the exercises which are musically based, and everyone here gets better, without exception. So the school is based on musical academics, harmony, mostly jazz, because jazz is the best music, in my opinion, that one would study, even if you don't want to do it as a career. The harmony in jazz is in every area of Western music, so that's what the Players School is about. Everybody gets better. Everybody learns how to play in time. No metronomes. Everyone learns how to play a groove. No groove classes. Everyone learns how to read. Everyone learns how to solo. Soloing is a good academic rather than a career choice if you don't want to. And everyone gets better. I mean, music and it isn't me, it's music. Music never lets anyone down, so that's what we teach here.
Well, setting music aside for a moment, as the father of 2 boys myself, I wasn't aware of that situation. My heart goes out to you, and I'm really, really happy to hear that your son was able to beat that. And I've got boys, I got boys ready to turn 5 and 2.
Okay. It's a rare thing that happened, and your boys will be absolutely fine, and most people's will. And if, God forbid, cancer has hit your families, people in this day and age, people get well. It's ironic as this might be to say, this is the era to get cancer if you're going to get it, because the methods are they're exponentially better than even that they were 3, 4, 5 years ago. People get better, and it's not the awful death sentence that it may have been 20 years ago or even further back. But people do get healed, and people do recover. So.
An interesting thing, too, is your 19-year-old son, not only did he get his health back, but, because of his illness, he sees the school and these people learning music that may not have come to pass if it, actually had a silver lining there. I'm sure
interesting thought.
Yeah, I'm sure all the students, that benefited from that, just goes to show how the world works sometimes.
Yeah, I know. It's a very good point.
I know you just returned from Italy, and by just returned, I mean just days ago. You did some clinics there with the awesome drummer Danny Gottlieb, whose name has come up on the show before. We played on all those early Pat Metheny albums. And I know from my correspondence with Diodato that there are some really top-notch players over in Italy these days. What was that experience like for you?
I've been to Italy on and off for years, decades. I love Italy. I genuinely love that country. People there are terrific. The food is terrific. The countryside, the ambiance is terrific. It's an absolute 100% win-win every time I go there. I love to go to Italy. And fortunately, there are still loads of little towns, sort of like Corleone and in The Godfather.
Yeah.
There's loads of these little hilltop sort of old towns. It's just a phenomenal country, and I've been to them, and sometimes we stay in hotels there, and sometimes we gig up in those places. It's you'll get a little jazz festival, and the town will opt for a little stage, and you'll get some of these guys. I mean, there's the same group of guys. It's me and Mike Stern will go up there, and maybe Matheny will play. Sometimes Keith Jarrett if he isn't ticking people off. Keith's a funny guy. Do you know he got banned from Umbria, from the Umbria Jazz Festival, because he cursed out the audience for using a camera?
Oh, wow. I always had trouble getting into him because of all the extraneous sounds he makes while he plays. I find it distracting, but he certainly plays really well.
The guy's the greatest jazz pianist that ever lived. I mean, I cannot remember a musician that got under my skin and into my heart and into my DNA as Keith Jarrett does as a piano player. I've listened to his records every night in my room before I've gone to bed for 5 years. It's like I cannot fall asleep without listening to something. I've transcribed them, and even with his, I ignore it all and recognize that this is one of the most genius, in the DNA level, genius musicians that ever was. Keith Jarrett stuns me and hurts me when I hear him play. I love it when there was a kind of a joke like that with a Spinal Tap. Made a joke. They say, music's got to hurt. And they were joking, but I'm not. Music to me, I've never really enjoyed music as background, I don't like to relax to music. I've never understood the concept. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. Music is not supposed to relax me. Music is supposed to hurt me, upset me, move me, touch me, get into my heart. I'm supposed to be exhausted afterward. I'm supposed to be transported someplace. That's Keith Jarrett to me.
You want to be emotionally involved in the music. You don't want a passive experience. You want to be invigorated by it, or as to trigger something in you, or what's the point?
Well, for me, and I do recognize that not everyone sees music the same way. I don't see art the same way. Mm-hmm. I have a friend of mine back when I was a boy in Great Neck, and his name was, I think, Noah Dorsky, and his father was a very important art dealer. And I went to his house once, and I was in their den with the kids. The kids' den. They had a color TV. What was hanging right over the color TV? An original Picasso. And I had to laugh years later at that, because I looked at the Picasso, and underneath it is a Zenith 24-inch.
Yeah.
And I laughed years later at that. So clearly, they must not have gotten the impact of what art must mean to them. I guess he just dealt in it.
Yeah.
But some people would have screamed at the audacity of putting a Picasso over a color TV. So I'm like that with music.
Picasso had the great line. Somebody asked why he didn't have any of his own paintings in his house. He says, "I can't afford them."
That's great. That's funny.
There's your commentary on art and commerce.
Oh, God, that's funny. What a crack-up of a line.
Well, of course, we have a lot of bass players in our listening audience, so I wrote to some of them, and I gave them an opportunity to submit their questions to you.
Wonderful.
I came up with some pretty good ones, so let's get to those right now. Jim from the UK has a question that I suspect he might already know the answer to. And,
all right.
And we got a little tip-off from you when you were talking about the school. His question is, what is your opinion of the benefits of practicing with a metronome?
The benefits, there are none, and the reason is because everybody already has good time. I've proven it in clinics. Let's say a lot of times I'll take people up that have never played an instrument in their lives. Sometimes you'll get a mother or a parent of someone who came along, or a girlfriend of a guy. He took her to the clinic, and without exception, people play steady pulse music. People in America do this thing called the chicken dance. Da 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 da. And they all do it in time, and they all do it together. People in church sing and clap in time. Everybody has good time. Music is supposed to be learned. It's not supposed to be performed. Performance is the reward for learning it.
Makes me
so
think.
If you practice with a metronome, what's the priority? And anyone can think about this. What's the priority? The music you're practicing, or keeping up with the click? Here's an example. No musician that learns that can play with a click in the studio got that time by practicing with a metronome. Just about none.
Okay, good. Well, that's the best answer to Jim's question then, is like, in terms of benefits of practicing with the metronome, there is none.
There is none.
Again, you just explained it very succinctly. So, cool. Well, thanks for that question, Jim. I'm glad.
It's a pleasure. Any other bass questions or any from your other guys?
I do. This one isn't really a bass question, but it has a yes or no answer, so you can answer it quickly.
Okay.
This is from Christian from Sao Paulo, Brazil.
Okay.
And he just wants to know, is Jeff Berlin related to Irving Berlin?
No.
Yes or no question. See, I wouldn't
That's
have thought
it. I'm not.
I wouldn't have thought so either till you brought up the Jewish Jackie Mason thing.
That's right. Irving Berlin makes more money than I've ever made in my life.
Bob from Santa Monica wants to know if there was a specific moment or a particular gig at which you made a conscious decision to pursue a career in music.
No, it was based on the Beatles and Cream. When I heard the Beatles and Cream back in the 60s and began to experience those bands that came along, not the Doors, not the Stones, but the Hendrixes, the Cream, the Beatles, those were really the center for me. And then the R&B, a little bit the R&B, more those bands because of their amazing, playing ability and writing ability. I was entranced by those groups, utterly and absolutely transfixed. I would wear those records out day after day after day. So it wasn't a one-time thing. It was that era and the music that was exposed to me that just made me become what I became.
I see. You didn't step on the stage one night and say, I don't know if I want to do this, and step off the stage and say, I do want to do this. It wasn't that kind of
never
thing.
happened.
Yeah.
I wanted to step on the stage the first time I heard Crossroads and Spoonful and the Beatles. When I heard, that's what I wanted. I knew.
Gotcha. Well, my own follow-up to that question would be, if you couldn't be a professional musician, you had to be a hobbyist like the rest of us, what other career outside of music would interest you?
I'm not sure. I might be a chef. I have to watch what I eat because I have heart stents, because I ate badly. But I deeply admire the great chefs. I really do. They're remarkable in their creativity of food, And I watch the cooking shows with this is a pun, with relish.
It's funny you say that because my wife and I watch them too, and my thought was, why would we want to watch people cook? Because you can't experience the food, you can't smell it, you can't taste it. But we find them fascinating, and like you said,
yeah, they're fascinating.
And it's because a lot of it is just the creativity. You take 6 ingredients and 4 people do it 4 different ways, completely different ways. They call it the culinary arts for a reason.
That's right.
All right, well, good. Well, if you have a hand injury, then you can cook dinner for all of us, I guess.
Yeah, I have to learn how. Right now, you don't want me to cook anything except Thanksgiving dinner. I'm great at that.
Yeah, you get to practice once a year.
Once a year, exactly.
Okay, I got 2 more questions.
Sure.
Okay, Nikki from Olympia, Washington. I think it's a she based on the way Nikki is spelled, but she doesn't so much have a question as an issue that she wants you to comment on, and that's the rise of female bass players in a traditionally male domain. She's referencing artists like Esperanza Spalding and Tal Wilkenfeld, who are not only as good as the boys, but in most cases, quite a bit better. Do you have many female students at Player School?
Occasionally, not that much. We get them, and usually they're a little shy, but we get them, and the first thing I tell them is that they are under protection and supervision by me to make sure that they're treated with respect. And my partner here is Vicky, my wife, and so she's a Venezuelan, so she really takes care of the women students that we have. She's like a mother, because her mother was like mama, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So Vicky watches very carefully. So we get some women here. We get more guys than we do women.
Well, to bring up, let's say, Tal Wilkenfeld, who plays with Jeff Beck and Vinnie Colaiuta, she's like 20-something years old. She's from Australia. Are you familiar with her or her playing?
Not really, a little bit. I haven't heard a lot of the bass players lately, but I'm certain if she's playing with Jeff Beck, she's good. And Esperanza Spalding, she's phenomenal as a bass player. I saw her before she got famous playing at the Vanguard with Joe Lovano. And, man, my eyes instantly got big. I said, this young girl can play. And of course, luckily, she could sing as well, because that's really what got her famous. It's that, I'd love to say it's just strictly a musical thing in terms of bass, but it's that voice, and she's a pretty girl, so, I'm glad for her, And one of my best friends produced her record, Gil Goldstein, so, yeah, she's very, very talented.
You got the whole package. Well, when you hear the term female bass player, Carol Kay probably comes to mind first, and Tina Weymouth from Talking Heads is a, fine and respected player, but... So I guess that even when the ones like Esperanza Spalding and Tal Wilkenfeld come along, it's still more or less not a male-dominant thing by design.
Oh, it is.
Just by interest. More guys want to play bass, I guess.
Oh, yes, it's absolutely a male-dominated. In fact, there's male-dominated drums, male-dominated guitar. The only sort of more or less say equal gender opportunities in singing and maybe piano.
Yeah, keyboards.
But even that's more male-dominated. No, music is a male-dominated art form, but certainly has room for anyone of talent, and that includes, of course, women that play well. And who was it? Who was that wonderful pianist? Marianne McPartland.
Oh yeah,
she was great. Someone mentioned someone in Italy, a lady pianist that I heard. I can't remember her name. Just brilliant. So certainly there's wonderful women musicians out there, no doubt about it.
Particularly in classical music, too. Just about any instrument in the classical realm, there are females that excel. So, one last question. I think it's an interesting one. This is from Marvin. He's from Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Sure.
And he wants to know if you've ever encountered resentment from other players who feel that, like, by demonstrating what can be done on the instrument, you've placed greater expectations on them, and by raising the bar, you've made their musical lives a little more difficult. I don't think he's trying to suggest that you should dumb down your playing to spare a lesser player's feelings. I think what he's getting at is trying to determine if you've encountered much petty jealousy along the way from other players.
No, I never have, but I have encountered a lot of resentment because I say things about music education that are contrary to popular belief. So in that regard, people are furious with me sometimes. But never have they been angry about, let's say, the playing thing that I've done. But some people, I've seen people say, Jocko couldn't this, and Stanley can't that, and they say it about me. And I'm a work in progress, so I'm still growing as a musician. But I can't say I've ever had anything except wonderful, kind support, good-hearted, good-felt feelings for my music, wonderful support from the people that, let's say, I meet them on Facebook. No, never.
In terms of the studio gigs you get now, how many of them do you do in person, and how many times is just files sent to you and you play on it and send the files back?
Mostly they're files sent to me, but if I do my record, I'll always do it live in a studio.
Yeah, it seems like the type of work that's out there is the file sharing, and then all the musicians doing it really understand why it's that way, but they dislike it because you don't get the interaction with the players.
Well, true, but that's sort of the joy for me in jazz, is that I only interact. It's precisely what actually I try to teach guys at the Players School to do, is to interact, and we play every day, and then when I tour, all I do is interact. I did with Danny, Danny Gottlieb, that is, for those Mark bass clinics, we played duet. I mean, you probably couldn't find too much more boring than a bass player and a drummer duet. There isn't a whole lot we can do. But Danny and I are very sort of adventurous guys, and all we do is interact and relate, and I'll play, and he'll, do this thing with my bass and vice versa. And I'm a very fortunate guy. All the guys that I know interact, and that's all I want to teach musicians to do, is to play better, interact, and enjoy the experience. It's not that hard.
Well, I want to mention that all the music we've played on the show today can be purchased at iTunes and CD Baby. Just do a search on Jeff Berlin. We've really only barely scratched the surface here of his musical output. There are a lot of amazing tracks we simply didn't have time to play, so I strongly encourage everyone to check those out. And I understand you've also got some new releases we can expect to see in the very near future. What can you say about that?
Yeah, I have my new CD. I call it Low Standards because it's going to be a trio again, upright bass / acoustic piano. Richard Drexler, my long buddy in music, my long partner in music. Richard is on upright bass, and I play the electric, kind of covering the upper range. He sticks a little bit low, and then we have Mike Clark from Herbie Hancock's band playing drums. And I always am proud of this, but every record I do gets better, I feel. And this is for me, my best bass performing on a record I think I've ever done. It's thrilling to me to be at a time where I can still feel like I'm getting better. So that comes out, and then I did a record with Dennis Chambers and Scott Henderson that's coming out. We don't have a name. It might be Henderson Berlin Chambers, I think, is what it's going to be called. And it's fusion covers. It's several songs from the 70s and 80s fusion songbook, not the popular ones. We don't do Birdland, and we don't do Teen Town, and we don't do, I think we do Stratus, though, which is a Billy Cobham tune. Features a phenomenal drum solo from Dennis. And so I have 2 records coming out this year, and I'll be on the road as well. So and at the Players School, so I'm quite busy and quite happy for that.
And, I want to encourage all of our listeners across the country and around the world, next time you're planning a vacation, you should consider visiting Jeff's school in Clearwater and participating in some classes, because I know you've got it set up so you can impart quite a bit of useful information in a short period of time. And, to return from a vacation as a better musician than when you left seems like a pretty productive vacation to me.
There's a thing we've started some years ago. We call it the 1 week intensive, and a lot of guys that can't come for the 10-week or longer courses, we get guys from all over the world that come for 1 week to Clearwater and spend that week practicing and playing and getting into some really special elements of music. So if people want to come, I'd be thrilled to see you here.
Well, Jeff, I want to thank you for being on the show. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Oh, God, thank you so much, Dan. It's just very kind of you.
This podcast was recorded in Phoenix, Arizona. It was engineered by Mike Post. Once again, I want to thank Jeff Berlin. I also want to thank all the bass players in the audience who contributed questions. We got a nice, funky one to go out on here. This is from Jeff's Aneurysms album. It's called Porky and Beans. So long, everybody.